let's get into some Star Trek news, since we haven't been able to talk too much Star Trek lately. And, of course, this is one of Doomcock's favorite topics.
Oh, it's the bestest fucking ever.
We actually have a few points to this, do we not, Rob?
Yeah, there's actually a few stories lumped in together. Simon Pegg actually says he knows why Star Trek Beyond failed.
Well, so do we.
Oh, God. Could I take this one?
Absolutely,
yes,
sir.
you may.
Simon Pegg shooting his fucking mouth off about, I know, secret, guys. I know, scoop, why Star Trek Beyond failed at the box office. It was because, get this, of the marketing. The marketing. The marketing was the last fucking problem with Star Trek Beyond. Guess what? Everybody knew when it was coming out. No marketing required. Every geek who was interested in Star Trek knew that thing was coming out, and the reason they stayed away is because of Star Trek Into Darkness, one of the worst fucking movies ever made. It was the one that really, I have used the term fractal of shit on Star Trek Discovery, but I coined that thing on Star Trek Into Darkness because the vast mind-blowing explosion of plot holes and illogic and bad reasoning. It would destroy, deep thoughts, calculations in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that had the answer to life, the universe, and everything. It wouldn't
42.
add up even to, 42, forget that. It would not be able to calculate 42 if it looked at Star Trek. It would be lost in that fractal of shit. And that thing, look what it did. It took the two things that make Star Trek and destroyed them both. A, it made, a briefcase size transporter able to transport you across the galaxy from Earth to the Klingon homeworld, hence eliminating the Star Trekking part of Star Trek, because now we don't need to have a ship anymore. We can just beam anywhere we want. So it eliminated space travel, A. B, it eliminated death, which is an essential element of any adventure or drama. It eliminated death. Anytime anybody gets snuffed, you just shoot them up with some con blood, and they're right as rain.
Yes.
So it eliminated trekking. It eliminated death. Why the fuck would I go see Star Trek Beyond? Beyond what? Beaming? All you got is transporting now. No death. Fuck that. We stayed home. And that, Simon Pegg, is the real answer to why Star Trek Beyond failed.
Can't argue with that.
Can't argue with those points. Very succinct.
God almighty.
Yeah, once you remove the death aspect, there's no stakes to anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty obvious the reason why Beyond did not perform at the box office. And not to mention the fact that they just spent too much money on it to begin with, but...
And as Doomcock once said about Mikey Spock, he goes, "How could you be concerned that a character is going to die when you are now rooting for them to die?" So
That's right. That's the incentive to tune in, is like maybe they'll die. Like when I watch The Expanse or Game of Thrones, I have certain favorite characters that I would rather, God, I don't want them to die. I'm begging for them not to die. When Jaime Lannister in the last season had that dragon heading for him, I was pretty shitting my, steel diapers here. And, but no, with Mikey Spock, I'm praying, I'm even looking for things like coronary thrombosis or, high cholesterol, anything. It doesn't have to be dramatic. If you just stop and drop, then I am a happy man.
assuming they don't have a stat in the 23rd century.
They don't. That the Klingons are lighting their bridge with torches. They've forgotten the secret of anesthetic when they're doing highly sensitive spy surgery on Ash. I don't think they have Previvin or whatever it's called.
Lipitor. No Lipitor in the Enterprise pharmacy.
No. When you get old, you're just fucked in Star Trek Discovery.
Well, that's a good thing then. That means they might have killed Big Pharma.
Well, that would be
Well, let's not get too political here. So let's move on, though, because Simon Pegg, like we said, he decided to pipe up about Quentin Tarantino Trek. Is that right?
Yeah. But he said he doesn't think Quentin Tarantino will direct a Star Trek movie. And so after saying he thinks that there's 3 possible different scripts, that he's not writing Star Trek 4, and that he doesn't think Quentin Tarantino will direct a Star Trek movie. Talk about a guy who just talks himself out of a job. Really.
Yeah.
Honestly, this guy's got his fingers so many pies, I really don't think he's worried, but yeah.
Well, the thing about it is that's so weird is that, they talk about Quentin Tarantino directing a Star Trek movie, and I think, so what? I mean, the whole interesting thing to me would be Quentin Tarantino writing a Star Trek movie. I don't give a damn if he directs a Star Trek movie. I mean, the strength is his voice, his individual voice as a creative, really a genius. I really am a big fan of Tarantino's work, especially his past work that was non-historical, that was kind of contemporary, and I think that he could do some amazing stuff. Remember the Star Trek scenes he wrote in Crimson Tide?
So it was actually Zachary Quinto who played Spock, of course, in the 3 reboot movies. He says that the other scripts in works, one is Quentin Tarantino's, the other 2 are separate for Star Trek 4. So that means that there is other scripts out there being written according to Quinto. So that does mean there is some movement on a Star Trek 4 besides Quentin Tarantino being involved. Now, we've heard from a few places that it's highly unlikely that Quentin Tarantino will direct a Star Trek movie, and that's, it's pretty unbelievable when you think about it too, unless he really decides he's going to. So on that aspect, I don't blame Pegg for saying that, because what are the odds, really? Unless Quentin Tarantino really has a passion to want to do it, and he's going to open up his schedule to do it, I really don't see it happening.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that he's been really that busy. I haven't seen nearly as much output from Quentin Tarantino as I would like.
Well, see, that's the thing, is what he does is when he gets into a movie, it takes him like 2-3 years of his life when he gets into a movie. That's why I just don't see him doing this. And usually he's very connected to whatever he's doing. He's writing, he's directing, he's producing, he's, from page 1 to, the end, he's there. In this instance, he's got other people working on these scripts, so in the end, if anything, I see him producing before I see him directing.
Yeah, and that's when it's exciting, is when he's actually, doing that full involvement, where he's the writer and the director. That's when that voice shines through.
Yeah. But actually, we have even more Simon Pegg news.
No!
Yes.
No!
Yes.
Simon Pegg actually has said,
shifting gears.
Yes, to a different franchise that has been recently
Doomcock's second favorite.
Simon Pegg has actually said that J.J. Abrams had other ideas regarding Rey's parents.
Now, this is important why, Rob, though.
This is important why, because it just shows you that freaking Rian Johnson opened up the mystery box and took a big heaping shit in it.
Well, besides the obvious, Rob, I mean, this goes along with the report we did recently, right, where Daisy Ridley had said pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, yes, Daisy Ridley said pretty much the same thing. Now it's being confirmed by when you have two. Okay, when you have one person saying something, you're like, all right, maybe there's. When two people are saying, oh, okay, maybe there's something to this.
Well, I think all you need is two witnesses for a murder, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Now we got the two witnesses. Star Wars is murdered.
Yeah.
Star Wars was murdered. Yes, we have two witnesses confirming it. Yes.
Yes.
So there's not a lot we can say that we didn't say before other than, what the fuck? Yes, we understand a director should be allowed to be able to bring a little bit to the table, but if you have a set plan going forward, you should see it through for a reason.
And when you're playing with someone else's toys, you want to give them back in the same condition that they gave them to you.
Yeah, it's not coated with shit and soybeans. It's just wrong.
Because I know, Doomcock, I know you're not a fan of JJ in the least.
No.
I could tell you don't like him that much, a little,
He's one of the four horrors of the apocalypse. Yes.
Exactly. So, but the point is here, I'm sure you can even admit that at this point, with the way things are, you would have at least liked to have seen this thing through to the end to see what the plan was from the beginning, right? At least you think JJ, if he had a plan going forward, they should have at least stuck with that plan just to see it through, right? I mean, it makes obvious sense, regardless of how Force Awakens turned out comparatively to what we got with The Last Jedi and how it turned out. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I think honestly, I see your point, and I agree with it to the extent that certainly if I was Disney, it is madness to proceed in a trilogy without having a through line for all three films. I mean, in the very broadest sense, you know, you've got to at least have, for the sake of simple coherence, you want to adhere to what was set before, the plan, you know, a blueprint. You can deviate from it a little bit, but, you know, you've got to have a vision because you've spent $4 billion on this thing. You know, you really, and you're hoping to spawn a new generation of fans. You're not going to let some guy go off and just kind of, I'm throwing out the blueprint and I'm just gonna go, you know, apeshit on this thing. It just totally derails any sense of coherence and through line. And personally, as a fan, I felt that J.J. Abrams killed Star Wars in the first one. You know, I think that decision sending Luke to that island, I mean, you better have a damn good reason why he went. To gain some arcane, you know, research, delve deep into the Jedi archives to come up with some kind of power because he foresaw some horrible, you know, Snoke-related thing or something coming. So, you know, he knew that he was inadequate to combat it, and so he appeared to run away, but, you know, in the end he was vindicated or something like that. But you have the entire theme of the thing, the feel of it, one by one, knocking down the heroes of the original trilogy. And really undermining the entire happy ending of that first trilogy by, you know, making Luke a coward, Han a deadbeat dad that gets shown up on how to fly the Falcon by, you know, Rey. And, you know, Rey gets the hug when he dies, not Chewie. It's just a patent disrespect at the molecular level for what came before, for the greatness that came before. And so, you know, I feel like it just kind of drove a nail in the coffin, Rian Johnson did, but I think that coffin was already occupied.
Okay, well, let's just put it this way, though, too, as far as you gotta admit, though, that there's a reason why JJ said that Luke left a map, right? And second,
in case things went tits up, that they don't want to find him.
And secondly, you can't imagine that JJ was like, okay, as soon as he hands him that lightsaber, he's gonna toss it over his shoulder. That's the plan.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, it would have been pandering and cheap, but it would have been coherently pandering and cheap. And it certainly wouldn't have been as bad as what Rian Johnson did. I think, yeah, we can definitely agree with that.
Right, and I'm not trying to stick up for JJ in the least. I'm just trying to point out the simple fact that we had a map here going forward. See it through.
Yes, you've got to. I mean, you bought it. You know, you Pottery Barned the damn thing. You know, you let JJ smash the pieces. Now you got to let him, you know, sweep them where he will. You know, whether you agree with his choices or not.
Right.
You know, you paid him, and he did the outline, and you approved it, and that's what the damn trilogy's going to be. It better be.
Or at least have a damn good reason and a coherent reason for changing those things, at least.
Yeah.
And then you look at George Lucas, as far as I know, they used a lot of what his originally planned outline was for in this film, in The Last Jedi, so it was like, what direction do you go from here, though? You can't say, well, obviously his idea was better then, you know, because it's not. It really wasn't.
I mean, well, let me just read the quote here. The quote actually on Twitter comes from Josh Horowitz. Simon Pegg confirms what I've long heard. JJ had a much different plan for Rey's parentage. And he's quoting Simon Pegg. I know what JJ kind of intended, or at least was being chucked around. I think that's been kind of undone slightly by the last one. Kind of undone slightly?
Right.
Yeah, there was some talk of a relevant lineage for her. So
a relevant lineage, that's the word. So in other words, she was gonna be a Skywalker or Solo.
Or a Palpatine.
Or a Kenobi.
Now, the Kenobi thing's a stretch. I don't...
Well, you never know. Or maybe she's Kit Fisto's long lost daughter.
Well, Kit Fisto's too busy fisting himself, so...
Oh, hey now.
Hey now. Like you said, you don't throw out the blueprint. The way you look at this is 3 floors of the same house. You build the first floor, and now, like you said, Rian Johnson came in and said, no, I'm going to do something completely different. And now you have a mismatched second floor, and he already put a roof on it.
Right. Well, and that's just it. Yeah.
What do you do with the third? What do you do with the third floor?
Or in the very least, you don't do it with somebody like Rian Johnson, to where, yeah, he's got some experience, but he's not experienced enough to do this. He's not a Ron Howard. He's not a Steven Spielberg. He's not a guy who can come in. He's not a James Cameron who can come in and you could trust him to go, okay, this isn't gonna. Let's do it this way. And they'll be like, oh, you're James Cameron. Go ahead. We trust your vision. You know.
And I keep saying this. I keep fucking saying this. Where is Joe Johnston? Where was Joe Johnston at the beginning of this? A guy who worked on Raiders of the Lost Ark, a guy who worked on The Empire Strikes Back, a guy who did a lot of the practical effects for George Lucas, and a guy who directed Captain America, the first fucking Avenger, which was one of the best Marvel. Where was Joe fucking Johnston? But Kathleen Kennedy didn't want anybody associated with any of the previous trilogies. She wanted no. I know what the audience wants. Well, fuck you, lady.
Oh yeah.
Okay?
Why is there no involvement from people like Ben Burt and all that shit? That bothers me. That does.
Yeah, and Kathleen Kennedy, who didn't want anyone to play Solo that even possessed a hint of balls, passed on Anthony Imgruber in favor of I don't know what.
Orville Redenbacher.
Lord and Miller, in our mini documentary, Chris Lord and Phil Miller said they actually
It's actually Phil Lord and Chris Miller. You keep saying it wrong, but yeah.
Those two guys, Phil and Chris, those two guys, the Lego Movie guys. They said that Al was the first guy who auditioned.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? They saw 3,000 people and they gave it to the first guy in the door.
Yeah.
And actually, this little bit didn't make it into the mini documentary, but Steven Spielberg actually. And Steven Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola both endorsed Al Redenbacher for the part of Han Solo.
I can't believe that. Jesus Christ!
Yeah, well,
guys.
that's I've read that in more than one place. And do you think Spielberg said, let's fuck with Kathleen Kennedy? Come on, yeah.
Well, then again, Spielberg sparked this whole Indiana fucking Jones thing. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had a little rant about that.
Yes, you did.
Yeah,
and we'll put a link to that in the description.
That was like the straw that broke Doomcock's fucking back. I mean, I saw red.
Well, and I can't take this from Rob. What did you call it, Rob? You called it Indiana Bridget Jones's Diary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God. You have to laugh. If I laugh at any mortal thing, does that I may not be.
Oh, we're right with you there.
Let's just put a cap on this. It's been beat to death. Thanks for confirming the murder, Mr. Pegg. We know the truth, though. The advertising doesn't mean shit. It was Star Trek Into Darkness.
As a special episode, we should have a mock trial of Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson.
Well, they did do the People versus George Lucas
Rian Johnson, Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, you are hereby charged with the murder of Star Wars.
I'm the defendant.
You can keep cutting back to me periodically throughout the trial, where all I do is just stomp my gavel and say, I sentence you to death. And then you can go on with the trial. I'm just like, I'm there already.
Best part yet is Goofy's their fucking attorney.
well, I'm just a country lawyer. Well, I don't know much about Star Wars. But
if the glove don't fit, you must, what
was that again?
Hey, listen. You can't send them to jail. They're my dope dealer. Mickey Mouse on crack.
You have no idea how much money I've spent on these fuckers.
With the recent changes to YouTube's monetization policy, we'd like to ask that you please consider supporting the channel through Patreon. As thanks, Patreon members will receive early notification of mini-documentaries, special behind-the-scenes making of the Edge videos, outtakes, bloopers, lost episodes, and more. Support tiers start for as little as $1 a month. Check the link in the description. Thank you.